Hey, welcome to science class today. Picking up where we left off last week in our study of SI units and customary units of measurement, we're going to further our understanding of these different ways in which we would use measurement in science by practicing a skill that is useful when measuring, estimation or choosing the correct unit to use, and also abbreviating SI units. Today in class, we're going to take a look at what it means to choose or estimate the appropriate unit for measurement. This is going to be really practical in science because scientists have to know what would be the unit that they're using for collecting data and making sure that that data is going to be taken correctly and appropriately applied to what they're studying. So you have two IXL assignments that are listed here and the links are provided. I'm going to walk you through what each of those is and how you would be successfully completing those for today's science class. First one I'm going to click on is HH.1. Should open up my link. Click on that link. Takes me to what is titled for our 8th grade science skill, choosing customary units of distance, mass, and volume. Now remember, customary units are the ones that are used by us. Customary has the US in it, so used right here in the United States, but you're applying that to what would be some of those metric units for length, mass, the amount of matter in an object, and volume, the amount of space that that object takes up. Here's an example of what one of those problems look like. We'll do a couple together and then move on to the next skill. The first, how long is a limousine? Select the best estimate. Okay, a limousine is a car, might be a longer vehicle. Maybe you've seen them that have multiple doors, or it's just an extended type of vehicle. It wouldn't make sense for it to be 9 miles long. It wouldn't make sense for it to be 9 inches long. 9 inches is about probably the size of your hand if you stretch it all the way out, maybe a little bit less than that. 9 feet is probably twice as tall as you are, so is the car going to be bigger or smaller than that? A lot of these don't make sense, so it's easy to eliminate and then select the correct answer. How long is a garden snail? Select the best estimate. It'd be a massive garden snail if it was a mile. It'd be even more massive if it was a yard, which is 3 feet, or 1 foot. It makes sense that the smaller of those values would be appropriate. How long is a passenger airplane? 200 miles might be how far that plane can travel. 200 inches might be a model of that plane. 200 yards is 2 football fields. Is a plane that big, or is it a little bit less than that? Got that correct. How long is a road from one end of a city to the other? Obviously, it depends on how big the city is, so you're going to keep that in perspective when you're making your estimation. Cities that are not this small, or this small. It could be obviously a lot larger than this 3 mile, given that that would be a relatively small city if it's only 3 miles long, but in reference to the other answers we have, this is the best one to submit. We're moving on to what would be the more difficult portions of this. You'll see that as we go through, it rises in its level of difficulty until we've got to that level of mastery that we're seeking, that 80 score again, that 80 SMART score. What's the mass of a city bus? Remember, mass is the amount of matter that an object has. You have to keep in consideration what some of those references are to these values. Ounces is a measurement of the liquid mass or volume of an object. Pounds would be how we're measuring how heavy something is, and tons is a way in which pounds can be turned into a different unit. 1 ton is equal to 2,000 pounds. So 10 tons would be 20,000 pounds. How heavy is a city bus? Probably going to be pretty close to that highest value. What's the mass of an ear of corn? Select the best estimate. 1 ear of corn is just 1 cob of corn. It's probably not going to be 14 tons, which would be 28,000 pounds. It's probably not going to be 14 pounds. That's still pretty heavy. So you make the correct selection here. What's the mass of a pair of boots? Select the best estimate. Again, these are our customary units for measuring mass. Otherwise, our SI units would be using grams. In this case, 4 tons is 8,000 pounds. 4 ounces is relatively light. And 4 pounds would probably be the best selection. Well done. What's the mass of a cement truck? 25 ounces, 25 pounds, or 25 tons, 50,000 pounds, especially if it's full of cement. Makes the most sense. Mass of a vacuum cleaner. 18 tons is way too much, 18 ounces is way too little, so it makes sense to make our appropriate selection. We're moving on to the next stage. What's the volume of a bottle of hairspray? Again, volume is measuring the overall space that this object is taking up, and it can be measured in terms of cups as a liquid, fluid ounces, or gallons, like gallons of milk. What's the volume of a bottle of hairspray? Let's see. Gallons is pretty big, especially 11 of those gallons. Cups would be like your measuring cup. If you're cooking something and there's a recipe that calls for 1 cup but 11 of those, that'd be a lot of hairspray. I'm thinking it's the smallest amount. Volume of a bathtub, 50 gallons is quite a bit, but we might come back to that. 50 ounces is relatively small if you're talking about a bathtub, and 50 cups probably isn't enough, so gallons is probably going to be our best bet. Hopefully that helps you get an idea of what you're looking for, distance, mass, and volume with our customary units. If I go back to our assignment checklist, the second one that we're going to be then choosing or estimating with are going to be those metric or SI units. So this is just the next skill, HH.2. Choose metric units of distance, mass, and volume. It's going to follow that same order. They're just going to be a different unit that you're using to best select and estimate. Let's run through a couple of these. How long is a garden snail? Wait, we just answered this question. Now let's make that conversion to what we thought about in terms of inches into now what we think about in terms of meters and the prefixes that go along with them. Kilometers are what are most associated with a mile, so this would be quite a large distance. Meters, the distance from the ground to like a door handle, is relatively long. 38 centimeters is over 12 inches. A 12-inch ruler has about 30 centimeters on it, so garden snail isn't that big. Millimeters, our smallest measurement based on prefix, is probably going to be the best answer for us. How long is an ice skate? Not a skating rink, but an ice skate itself. Kilometers is way too big. Meters is way too big. We're probably going to have the difference between centimeters and millimeters. Millimeters, again, is a really small measurement. If you thought about the 30-some centimeter or millimeters we just said the snail was, 27 centimeters is going to be your best estimate. So this is going to be a little trial and error. We're going to jump to the next section so that you can see what that looks like for mass and for volume. What's the mass of an eraser? Grams to kilograms. You got to reference that kilograms is a huge amount. Kilo actually means 1,000 in terms of grams. So you would take this value, if you're going to convert it to grams, and multiply it by 1,000 to be 50,000 grams in 50 kilograms. So kilograms is way bigger if they were referenced in the same term. So 50 grams would probably make a lot more sense and look like that. We get it right. What's the mass of a pair of boots? Kilograms, again, is a massive amount of grams. 2 grams is a really, really small amount. Which one do you think is going to be the best? What's the mass of a bicycle? 9 grams is really, really a small amount. Kilograms is probably going to be best for us there. Mass of a full box of cereal. Now, how heavy is cereal versus how heavy were the things that we just answered in the previous two questions? You're using some different ways in which you compare those items. Full bag of groceries, relatively heavy. Great job. Jumping to volume. What's the volume of a test tube? Test tubes are relatively small, probably about the size of your finger. If you ever had your blood drawn, they stick the needle in the line of that cord, fills with blood, goes into the test tube, probably about the size of your finger. Is that in terms of liters or milliliters? Now, when I talk about liters, think about a 2-liter bottle of soda. Big bottle of soda, that's a 2-liter bottle. So half of that is 1 liter. Is a test tube that big? Probably not, a little bit smaller. What is the volume of a fish bowl? Milliliters is very small. Liters are going to be, again, in terms of how big that 2-liter bottle is, just because that's the kind of the visual way it registers in my mind and probably is easy for you to associate with. We're going to say that that makes the most sense based on those two. What's the volume of a bowl of soup? That's a lot of liters, probably not as much. What happens if I get one wrong? It's going to tell me what it is that I did wrong and help me to think about it in a bit different way. I'm going to get this one wrong. What's the volume of a kitchen sink? Well, I'm going to pick one that's way too small, and sorry, that's incorrect. They're going to give me an explanation. It then tells me again what is volume, the difference between milliliters and liters, that conversion rate that we've practiced with in our previous 2 lessons to understand that. And now it's going to help me to say, well, here's a better way to make that estimation and solve that correctly. Got it, and I'm back into trying to get those problems and answers correct. Hope this helps. Take care of both of those, and they'll automatically submit to Mr. Shane so that I can get those into the gradebook as soon as possible. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Again, when you're signed into IXL or doing something on IXL, make sure you're signed in. Otherwise, all that work that you're doing won't save. If you're signed in, it'll automatically save and it'll automatically submit until when you get to that overall 80 score. If you go above that, you might find it in your gradebook that would be rewarded as some type of extra percentage or extra credit because you're working to get to that complete level of mastery beyond what would be considered 8th grade proficient. We want to be working hard all the time. So I encourage you to go beyond that 80 score and do the best that you can.